Okay, guys, welcome back to the show. And I have a special guest for you on the show. His name is Mr. William Miller. You may know him from the Netflix sensation Warrior Nun. William, how are you today, man?
I'm good. I'm good. Recently recovered from a bit of a bad health spell, but I'm okay. Way of a way to start the year. Let
Yeah,
me try.
exactly. I barely made it through that sentence there, and my voice is going already. But
Yeah,
I think everyone is sick at the moment.
yeah. There's something going around.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of being sick, anyway, we may as well start. Like, what were the last few years for you? Like, kind of within COVID and stuff like that. Did it really set you back, or what way did it kind of affect you from an acting point of view?
I think it obviously affected all of us in a massive way.
Yeah.
Travel wise, we were unable to not only not see loved ones, which is the worst thing, but work wise, it was very difficult to travel. The whole thing caught me when I was in LA, and I was only going for a short trip to have a couple of business meetings, and shit hit the fan while I was there, and I ended up having to stay for like 3 months because travel just became. Can you? Sorry, I just cut off.
Yeah, yeah.
Travel became impossible, and until they sorted everything out and figured how they would do the testing, I couldn't really get back home. Once I did, while I was in LA, they gave us the green light for season 2 of Warrior Nun. We were told when we were going to film. Uh, I was hoping that would, you know, be on schedule, which it was, because one of the things the pandemic did do was, in my opinion, it kind of leveled the board when it came down to all the platforms. Because Netflix, up until then, had the highest or widest menu of what you could choose. It was like
Yeah.
no one could ever get through Netflix, but we all did. And these new platforms were coming in with new new uh, new offers and older stuff that they were taking away from Netflix or HBO. Disney starting with its own stuff and putting its own stuff on its own platform. But when it came to new things like platforms like Apple or platforms like Disney, they didn't have as much content, and I think it kind of set things at par because people were consuming so much, which for our business meant that we had to keep filming, we had to keep working. It was
Mm.
yes, a commodity, but a necessary one. So we found ourselves having to film in not the most comfortable situations. Like I was getting tested 3 times a week, and even so, people got COVID on set because it was just inevitable in a way. There was no way to catch it before it happened. Because people wouldn't be aware if they had it.
Yeah.
Some of the tests wouldn't actually show a positive until 2-3 days after you had it, and that was too late. You'd already been in contact with people. So even though we were trying to control it, it was a very hard thing to do. But we made it through. Um, not the best kind of way to film a show. I'd say, as an
Yeah.
actor, you like to build close relationships with the people you're working with, but we were kind of isolated from each other, which was uncomfortable. And having to, do our table readings like you and I are speaking right now,
Yeah.
had an interesting result too, because it's kind of made this the new norm, and people have accepted it, adapted to it. So it's made this easier both for casting and considering actors for certain things, not having to travel all the way across the Atlantic to have a meeting, or interviews like this one being not so unusual anymore. So it has had its positives, I guess.
Yeah. What was it like being in LA kind of around that time? Because I heard it got kind of eerily scary there because of how hustle and bustle it normally is.
It it got weird. Because at the beginning, everyone was like, "Nah," I was living in the valley with my what I who I call my American family. I always stay with them when I'm over there, and we usually keep to ourselves anyway, so it wasn't that much of a difference. I'm usually in LA for business, so I have friends there, but we don't see everyone's always busy.
Yeah.
It didn't change in that matter too much. I was able to LA did start getting a bit strict, but they weren't as strict as other countries. Like I could go out for a run and go and do my sport, go grocery shopping, which is kind of what I do when I'm in LA anyway.
Yeah.
But it did kind of coincide with the whole Black Lives Matter movement. And that was kind of crazy because it was something that, what happened with George Floyd obviously needed an immediate response and it needed people out on the streets. So it was understandable that whole thing was going on and everybody was trying to support it and acknowledge the movement. But at the same time, everyone was like, listen, this could be a health hazard. So, how do you deal with it? And was something that was kind of unknown at the time too. How it was going to spread, how the government was going to deal with it. Every state able to make their own decisions on how to handle it. It was kind of scary, and also, what Americans are like. They love going and getting that toilet paper and stocking up. And funny enough, there were more queues in front of the gun stores than there were in front of the markets.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy. But then, the stocking up the markets was kind of difficult. So I discovered a new market that was actually close to where I was living. It was a kosher market. I'd never been there, and so I was eating kosher for like a few weeks, which was great. And then Bill and Mary Jo, who I was living with, we got into like doing a daily routine, trying to ignore each other for as much as we could, to not get on each other's nerves until 5 p.m. we'd get together for a martini. So every week we'd buy a different bottle of gin, just to test, So that it was keeping yourself busy in interesting ways. I did manage to get a lot of writing done, which was great. I managed to, finish 3 different projects that I was working on, which are now kind of moving around Hollywood and different places. So it forced me to become proactive, which, I also have COVID to thank for. So I guess it wasn't.
In terms of the projects that you were writing, is that anything you can talk about, or is that kind of just under the table for now?
Well, mostly comedy. It's what I prefer, what I grew up with, what I feel I'm best at. Although I'm not that well known as a comedy actor, but in Spain, where I've done most of my work, I started to get known as a comedy actor later on too. But because I've done more work here, they started trusting me a lot more with that kind of material early on, and I found that it's what I'm best writing. It's very dialogue based, so being an actor that comes easily or easier. But yeah, I've got one project that's moving around LA. It's piqued some interest. Problem is, I don't know if I've chosen the right time for any of this because studios are kind of holding back now, not knowing what they want or what's going to work, and kind of being very picky on things that they need. The things they choose, they need them to work. I don't know if it's because the bubble has burst or the golden age is coming to an end and streaming's going to change. But anything they take on now, nobody wants to be responsible for a failure. So they're being very careful with what they choose. It either has to have like a 100% approval of we know this is going to work, or have A-list actors in it, or whatever. So it's kind of going back to the stage of we don't know, and I think it does have to do with all these streaming platforms coming to equal level, being a par. Nobody wants to lose against anyone, and everyone wants the next successful show. But if the next successful show means we're not going to be seeing anything new or anybody new, I think that's going to become stagnant at a certain point, and I think it's a shame because I think we were heading into an interesting direction.
Yeah, and
obviously there have been mistakes being made. I'm not too much in favor of. I think acting's been taken out of the equation usually is on so many different levels. Oh, I found this person has so many followers, or this model or whoever it is who's perfect for the part, and they might be. You might put them in front of the camera, they might be absolutely natural for that part. Yeah, they're the part. Put them in something else, they're useless because they're not. And there's so much of that's been going on. On behalf of a lot of productions or castings, get the person who's right for the part.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is down to social media, isn't it? And social media influencing and all that kind of stuff.
But we're also getting to a point where I feel that people are figuring out that social media really doesn't it doesn't have the significance we think it does. Shows like can't remember the Netflix shows. The one that they try and make these 4 people that are complete unknowns, and they try Fake Famous. Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Okay.
I enjoyed watching that because it kind of did bring everything. I've never ever tried to, I personally I don't like social media. I'm quite private with my own life, and I like to stay that way. I always think that the more you get to know an actor, the less you believe him on screen. I have been quite with this show because of what's happened to us, but I also think that there's a lot of manipulation going on with social media by the influencers themselves. Bots or buying followers and stuff like that. I've never, I've been approached by several platforms that have said, well, do you, if you record these salutations or congratulations or small videos, will pay you so much for each video. I'm like, I just don't contact me anymore. I'm an actor. I don't do these things. I mean, it's fine for anybody who wants to do it, but I just think it kind of takes the seriousness of what I do away. This is my own personal opinion. It's not.
Yeah.
I'm completely in favor of anyone doing whatever they want, but I just think that there's something about the job, and there's something about being serious about the job that has been lost or is being lost, and I just hope that whatever's happening now to readdress the industry takes that into consideration and starts working and starts valuing our work more than it has lately.
You remind me in the way that you talk there. I talk to a lot of pro wrestlers on this podcast as well. And I talked to guys maybe from that were in the WWF, say in the 80s and the early 90s, and they kind of say the same because when they were in that profession, they wanted to try keep it as real as possible. They wouldn't be seen on nights out. They wouldn't be seen having dinner with the guy they were fighting in the ring and stuff like that. And I understand kind of, if that makes sense along those lines, what you're saying as well.
Yeah, well, I'm not too sure what you're referring to as in WWF, like World Wrestling Federation.
Yeah.
because there's a lot of acting involved.
Yes. Yep.
And I used to watch it all the time. I was a huge Ultimate Warrior fan, and the Undertaker and Hulk Hogan. That's more my generation, the Bushwhackers.
Yeah, I actually had the Bushwhackers. Well, one of the Bushwhackers on the show there 2 weeks ago, Bushwhacker Luke.
I love them. I absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
But yes and no. I mean, I would never mind being called out having dinner with somebody who's my enemy on a show. But to them, I guess it was kind of like Christmas. You got to keep it real for the audience in a way. I wouldn't dare second guess any of them because it's within my industry, I know there's acting, but I take the physical work that they do very seriously, and I think there's a big part of what they do that has to keep them on the edge of being believable. You
Yeah.
know, the fight has to seem real. So yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, we have to talk about Warrior Nun anyway. I'm sure at this stage you might be sick of talking about it, are you?
About
About Warrior Nun?
no, I never get tired because there's something very interesting that's going on right now with
Yeah.
and I think it has to do with what we were talking about before, like the future of shows and what do we go for? Do we go for something new? Do we go for something, or do we go? You know, uh, I'm going to make a comparison between two Netflix shows that,
Okay.
and I love both of them. You know, Wednesday I think it's a great show. I think I think it's a show that you know obviously it's an appropriation of something that is kind of hard not to think it's going to work. You know, especially if you've got someone like Gina Ortega, who's a brilliant actress,
Yeah.
and everybody else is on the show who, you know, I've seen them here and there. They're talented actors. You know, the cast has been properly done. You got a couple of showrunners that are really good at what they do, and it's done tastefully. It's mixed in there with a bit of Harry Potter-esque kind of genre, which you also know is going to work, especially with the young audience and the young
Yeah.
adults have a detective story going on. You know it's going to be a hit, but because it has the franchise behind it. So, are these the shows that we're going to see as from now? Are we going to play it safe and go for something like this, or something that came out of, and I'm not going to be blind to what we are. Warrior Nun came out of the Me Too movement, and I'm completely aware of that. But I think it's a step further. And even if it did come out of a certain movement and having to choose certain shows over others because of the content, the show was very well done. You had an incredibly talented showrunner that had proven himself time and time again, Simon Barry, Ghost Wars, Van Helsing, just a bunch of Continuum, a bunch of shows that are brilliant. Doing something like this and doing it excellently, choosing the right people in front and behind the cameras, and telling a story that is interesting, new, and was going into a very different realm than season one. Season three was just going to blow it out of the park. It was going to be, we've gone from something Dan Brownish, something religious, religious law orientated into full blown sci-fi. To not have the time to tell that story is a shame. Problem is, what are we basing a cancellation on now? Because if I have to think of the cost of our show and how well it did, I think it played quite well. It's not my place to say. Obviously, I can only thank that.
Is season 3 not happening, William, officially?
Well, as far as I know right now, as far as anyone knows, we've been cancelled.
Oh,
So we're waiting to see. We've got a huge fan base,
yes.
and I think we've got one of the loudest movements to save a show that I've ever seen. Like bigger than Lucifer, bigger than Manifest, bigger than a lot of shows that did end up getting picked up by other platforms or saved by its own streamer. I mean, quite frankly, I'd love to be able to stay on Netflix. I love Netflix. I think they've always made very interesting choices. I think they're a great platform to be on. I think they're very international in their choices too. I think
Yeah.
they try and cater for a lot of different audiences, and I think they gave us the opportunity. They were brave enough to put Warrior Nun on on their selection, and that's where I'd like to stay personally. It's not up to me, and definitely even if it were up to anybody in our show, it'd be up to our showrunner. But I think we've hit over 5 million tweets on Twitter. We've got over 100,000 signatures on change.org. And huge results every day when it comes to the fans shouting out on saving the show.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it involves. I don't know if we do need to go on another platform, if that means that Netflix has to relinquish the rights. I have no idea. But right now, all I'm seeing is, or what I think, we did very well on numbers. We were on the top 10 for over 3 weeks and surrounded by shows that came out at the same time as us that they knew they knew were going to do well, and they had promo, they had PR. We didn't have anything, and that's something that surprised me. I don't know why Netflix did it. I think the show was strong enough to stand on its own, but it would have been nice to have seen a bit of money put in towards promotion, because it would have helped for people to see it back on its legs. So what I'm doing now on social media, which I don't usually do, is be a bit more proactive with the fans, because I think they deserve to know that they're not the only ones that are fighting for this. I like fighting for things I've done and that I've dedicated. It hasn't been 2 years of my life; it's been almost 4. The waits and it's not only filming, it's the waiting for a renewal, which we had to wait for a long time for. Once we get approved, waiting through COVID, filming, having to wait again for the show to come out. That's a lot of time off an actor's professional career. So it's kind of left us wanting, either for an explanation or hey, well, as long as there's people fighting for this, or as long as I think there's a fight to be fought, I'll be part of it as another show, but also as somebody who's dedicated a lot of their professional time to something that they care about.
Yeah. What do you think is it about the show that resonates with so many people? It's so popular, but as you said a couple of moments ago there, I didn't know about the show. I was just kind of flicking through it. I didn't hear any kind of advertising over here in Ireland behind it either. But sometimes you're just kind of, when you're just looking through things and you're like, maybe we'll go with this. But I didn't hear any promo in the lead up to it coming out.
So I'm just going to move this.
Yep.
I got to plug in.
Yep.
I'm gonna run out of juice. Sorry. There we go. Is that it? Yeah, that's it. Okay. Let's see. There's quite a few things to be said about the show, and I don't like sugarcoating things. I think that there's a huge audience that's that's very invested in the sapphic part of the show. The LGBTQ movement is very protective of their shows, and I'm all for it. I'm all for representation. Yep. And the more years have gone past, and the more there's several things that have clicked with me about representation. That in the past I would have thought, we're getting there. It's gonna happen. Let's just calm down on it. But there's things that I've seen within the industry, or even as a spectator, that have made me realize that it is necessary to push the boundaries. Because if we don't, it's only going to bounce back and not have the effect that it should have had. And one of the things that happened to me was I remember watching a video, the Little Mermaid, the movie is about to come out, and the Ariel is the mermaid's name. She's a black girl, And I remember watching a video of a black kid watching the trailer for it, and the look on her face, it just made it. It made me cry. I was like, well, yeah, I get it. These kids haven't seen anything like that, and their parents hadn't seen anything like that in their whole lives. That's
Yeah.
not. I have different opinions on changing the way history was, because I think anything we do that's historical, uh, because I am a historian, we need to be true to everything that happened and how we portray it. We need to be
Yeah.
truthful, because if not, we're just sugarcoating the past. But when it comes to representation, I think it's necessary. When it came to Warrior Nun, I could only hope that it was going to be done properly. And when season 2 hit, it was done properly, and it was done in good taste, and it was very well written. It was very well acted. So I was very happy with the way it went. But I was afraid that that was the only message that we were going to get from this show, because um, that sector of audience are very outspoken and very loud on social media. So sometimes that's all you're going to get. You're just going to hear about the representation.
Yeah.
And I thought there was so much more to the show than that. As somebody who had been brought up Catholic in a very religious school, um, and somebody close to me had been traumatized, manipulated by I'm not going to say religion, because I don't think the people that were in that school and taught at that school representative of what Catholicism is. But
Yeah.
we all hardcore sectors of any religion that can cause a lot of harm. And I thought that was very well portrayed in the show. I think we were dealing with a lot of issues, subjects that haven't been dealt with for a very long time, and not only sapphic representation, but women, uh, and equality and greed, and all the bad aspects of any organized, not only religion but system. And it was so interesting the way we were going into that, and how outspoken the show was about these things within its own law. But
Yeah.
and of course, I wasn't getting much of that through what I was reading on social media, until I started, you know, having a couple of interviews from the fans on Twitter Space, and suddenly I started to get people talking about these issues that mattered to me, because I'd been not traumatized, but I was very well aware of what was happening as I was growing up. How some people were using a system of beliefs to try and manipulate people. And even though I'd say I don't think they managed it with me, the way I brought up and the system of beliefs I had, or having been brought up within Catholicism, makes me think a certain way and believe a certain way, and has given me a series of tools that said this is right and this is wrong, and
Yeah.
changing that when you're older is so much harder. Um, and there were a lot of people that were expressing the same issues to me on these spaces. So I think the show has reached people on a lot of levels, not only because of representation, not only because of woman empowerment, but also because it's dealing with things that maybe haven't been dealt with for 2,000 years, and it's being very outspoken about them now. Not that these things haven't been spoken about, or aren't being spoken about on general media, but in a show that's for young adults, I think it's important,
Mm.
because that's the age where you start distinguishing. You live amongst this society. This is what's right, and this is what's wrong in that society. And what's right and what's wrong is still based on things that have been told to us, for the last 2,000 years.
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting for people to make their own minds up about things. And education's changing a lot. I think it should change a lot more than where we are right now, because I think education is the base of everything. But I think our show was talking about some things that can make people think. And um, for a young adult show, I think we were talking about some issues that are probably a lot more dangerous to talk about than things like shows like Wednesday might be talking about. Don't get me wrong, I love Wednesday. I watched the whole thing in 2 days. It was just highly entertaining. I love watching TV. It's part of my job.
Yeah.
But be brave. As they keep telling us, as people within our industry, they keep telling us you have a responsibility to mold the world and show the world that we want in the future. It's not the world that there is now. We see that every day on TV shows. Like young kids have friends of every single color that exists in every single religion. That's not true. We know it's not true, but it's what we want. It's what we. So be brave. Just be a bit more. Be a bit more spicy on your content. Don't get afraid to offend certain sectors, because if you do it right, they won't be offended. They'll actually agree with you. The church is changing. We all know that. Look at the Pope.
Yeah. The world is kind of the world has kind of become very conservative, hasn't it?
My fear
To
is
say the least.
my fear is we're heading. It was opening up. We were getting. Gay rights, Black Lives Matter, Me Too. These were all necessary things to move forward. And suddenly, amongst all of this, you suddenly get, extreme right wing politicians back into government, and ideas coming back that are very dangerous. And there's things that they're things that we've had to face before, and we know that they're not going anywhere good. But history's always been like that. Certain liberties come into perspective, and the old establishment gets frightened instead of embracing it and saying, okay, like Henry Ford did at the beginning of the 1900s. This is the way it has to go. We can't change the system so easily, but maybe we can take some steps forward. But it's no use taking a step backward, or being extremely cautious now with whatever you put on your platform. It's too late for that.
Yeah.
Like, there's a generation coming up behind us that want to think for themselves.
Yeah, I had a guy on the other day from a very famous Netflix show, Tiger King. I've actually interviewed Carol Baskin and many of the cast. Yeah. So I had a guy on, Tim Stark, the other day, and that's the second time I've had him on, and somebody wrote underneath it, I like how he just lets him, like, I let him kind of say what he wants. I don't want to edit his interview and take out his curse words or whatever he says. I just let him be himself. But of course, we done a live show the other night, and a few things came out.
You're not the usual guy that would interview someone from the cast from our show usually.
Yeah.
But that's the cool thing. You and I probably come from a different, different. We consume TV differently, but maybe I can talk. Maybe you ask questions or behave in a different manner for me to be able to talk to you in a different way and be a bit more open about my own ideas. Obviously, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna commit professional suicide on here.
Yeah. What I meant by it was I just let
Clever,
people say what they want.
but but I can be, I can probably be a bit more open about, you have a space partly dedicated to rock and roll. That, rock is a huge part of my life, and the
Yeah, and
reason,
that's
and
the
one of
next
the,
thing I was going to talk about.
it's one of the reasons I am who and how I am, because I grew up on rock and roll, and rock and roll has always been a music of the nonconformist, of the rebels, of the revolution, and that's pretty much who I am, and that's pretty much how I think. So that's what interested me the most about maybe having a chat with you,
Yeah.
because rock is not at its best moment right now, but
Oh
I
no.
still step on stage, and I go out there, and then I have a few thousand people, with one of my bands, because it's kind of like a rock orchestra, and it still works even with the young people, but they're not exposed to it nowadays because that it's not being played on the radio, at least
Yeah.
not here in Europe. We've gone from people playing instruments on stage or even on television to not having one single instrument on stage when they do these shows. I was watching Graham Norton the other day. This girl came out. I don't know who she is. I'm too old, but it was her and John. Not one instrument. I'm like, come on, guys, just have a
Yeah.
little respect for what we call music, not that what
What's
she
what's
does.
your
Good.
yeah.
Jesus.
What's your opinion on the Eurovision?
Hey, I have nothing bad to say about Eurovision. It gave us great artists. I mean,
Mm,
ABBA, for Christ's sake. I'm a huge fan.
yeah.
Huge
Yeah.
fan. And it's given us great musicians like Sergio Dalma from
Lord
here in Spain.
Lordy.
Lordy, yeah. I mean, what the hell? And the Italian guys that won, what was it, last
Manskin.
year? Yeah, Manskin. Yeah, that guy had
Yeah.
been busking wages on the street. Good for him. Good for him. But I think Eurovision, there's something about Eurovision that when somebody is a musician and is talented, like one of my neighbors from here, she's a Dutch girl. She was playing the guitar with, I think it was a guy that came in first 2 years ago or something. But they were playing on stage. Like Eurovision, somewhere where you can't get away with not playing on stage. Like if there's instruments in
Hmm.
your band, you have to have them there.
Yeah.
Whether or not they're
They
playing.
pre-record. I met
Yeah.
a couple of guys last year in Texas that represented Finland in the Eurovision 2 years ago. Blind Channel. They're kind of a new metal type band. And
Yeah.
I went to Dallas last year to go to WrestleMania with a couple of guys, and they happened to be playing that week. So I booked the flights a day early to go see those guys. And
Awesome.
they're not famous in America. We got to hang out with them. Turns out their manager was Irish. Turns out he knew people that we knew, so everyone knew each other. Met the band, had drinks for the night. But we were talking about the Eurovision, and he said the only thing that's live on stage is the vocals. He said everything else is pre-recorded.
Yeah. Yeah. But still,
But that's understandable though, because that's a massive production. Anything could go wrong.
yeah, exactly. But still, I mean, yeah. So if you had to ask me about Eurovision, I watch it every year. I have a
Yeah,
lot of fun watching it. But I guess and sometimes Eurovision is like is like the karaoke. You either have to be very good or awful. Like anything that's in between, you're gonna get booed off stage. Uh,
yeah,
if you're really bad, people are gonna have fun, have a laugh, and you're gonna have a laugh because you got up there and you had the guts to do it. And if you're really good, people enjoy it. And we've seen some hilarious stuff on Eurovision, but we've seen some really good stuff, and sometimes it's a good window, especially nowadays. Where how do you get seen nowadays? How do you get seen? This just it's not possible. I feel really bad for bands that are starting nowadays, including my
yeah.
own. I've got a tribute band to
I've
Rage Against the Machine.
yeah,
I got a band that plays all 80s and 90s covers of rock. It's just impossible, unless you start trying to promote yourself. But even if you try and promote yourself on social media, it doesn't mean anything's going to happen. You got to put money into it. I mean, to me, I had a huge discussion with some musicians here in Spain about the part of the record labels. I mean, what is their responsibility is to bring the music out. They used to have ARs that went out, scouted bands, and they invested the money in trying to make something of these bands if they thought they were good.
Mm-hmm.
What are they doing now? Like, in my experience, they just wait for a band to have enough, a big enough following,
Swipe them.
take them on, and then they take a percentage of their live earnings. I mean, what kind of business is that? You're there because you know music. If you see these people are good, help them.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee anybody who has anything to say are probably going to be people that don't have a lot of cash. Because if they have something to say, it's because they've had to work their asses off. It hasn't been a comfortable ride. They have lived. So help those guys out. That's what you're supposed to be doing. That's why you exist.
Yeah. I feel like I just hear and I'm just kind of waiting in Ireland, we'll say, for the same bands to come back. Oh, when will Metallica come back? When are Slipknot coming back? Or when are AC/DC? Are they going to come back? And we're going to go to that. But in terms of new music, I'm not consuming much at all. In fact, that last band I mentioned, Blind Channel from Finland, they're probably one of the newest bands that I listen to. And they were picked up shortly after Eurovision by Century Media, which are a pretty big record label. And I don't know how that's working out for them, but they seem to be busy.
Well, and I wish them the best, really, because being in the business nowadays. But as you said, I think as from the year 2000, like it's only the names, the last big bands that we still remember and are still going to go on, and bands from the 90s, and that's a real shame. That when is our generation going to have another like Beatles or Rolling Stones or Elvis? It doesn't happen, does it? Why doesn't it happen? There's just too much out there. And when you can use, I read something, it's actually gonna read it to you because it's supposed to be a quote from Freddie Mercury.
Okay.
And I believe he would like this. Wherein the Freddie Mercury said, we're in the golden age of music. There will be a time in which technology will be so advanced that we'll confide in it to make music instead of confining in brute talent. And music will lose its soul. We're here.
I think we are, yeah.
We're here, and we've been here for a while now. When Latin America's biggest star is Bad Bunny and not someone Joaquin Sabina or that.
That guy as well. That guy, he's. I don't know anything about him, but he's a fucking megastar in terms of followers and everything. They had him. They had him wrestling at WrestleMania 2 years ago in a match, and I was like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" But he's big in America.
Oh, he's huge, and good. But that's all the music we're getting now. Like on the Latin side, that's all we're getting. I think the states are still, because the states you still get rock on the radio in America.
Yeah.
But in Europe, I haven't lived in the UK for a very long time, but here in Spain, there's only one rock station, and it's like they put the same CD on.
We've got the same one here in Ireland. Bon Jovi, Living on a Prayer.
Jesus.
Metallica, Enter Sandman, just Enter Sandman. The same kind of stuff over and over again. Yeah. It's called Radio Nova over here.
Yeah, and so young audiences aren't getting introduced to rock and roll, and I come from the generation of Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses, Bon Jovi, prior to that Led Zeppelin, Ozzy Osbourne, Halloween, and then my big formative years were the 90s, with Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Stone Temple Pilots, Alice in Chains. all of these bands,
Mhm.
the
I'm
lyrics.
I'm a rock DJ and I do monthly nights in Dublin City. And I don't think we ever play a song that was made after, say, 2002, 2001, maybe. You
Unless
know?
it's Foo Fighters or
Yeah,
something, maybe a bit of Red Hot
Queens
Chili
of the
Peppers.
Stone Age, maybe sometimes,
Yeah.
things like that. But in terms of rock,
That's
it's all,
Dave Grohl, isn't
yeah.
it?
In terms of rock, it'd be like the same old stuff. I don't think I've had to update my playlist. I put Metallica's new song on it just in case anyone wants to hear it. That's the last thing I put on it.
But look at what happened. Sorry, still getting over this.
Yeah.
Look at what happened with Stranger Things. I mean,
Oh yeah.
one of the most epic moments of of contemporary television or modern television. Eddie playing monster puppets on that tin roof, and kids suddenly saying, "What the fuck is this?" You know,
Yeah. Mm,
I mean, and suddenly they're in the lists again. You know, they make top 10 again. But it's because these kids that they're not being exposed to this kind of music. Why? I don't know. Is there, you don't want them to. I mean, a song comes to mind, Rooster by Alice in Chains.
yeah.
Jerry Cantrell singing about his dad's experience in Vietnam, and how he was traumatized by it, and how he didn't really have a dad because his dad was away, you know, and how that affected those kids that were the children of that generation. They had something to sing about, and it's tough to listen to.
Hmm.
Or Cornell's lyrics, Eddie Vedder's lyrics. But I mean, mind you, Eddie Vedder, Pearl Jam, Jeremy. Uh, you could sing that today, and it would be very relevant. It make a lot
Hmm.
of sense. This teacher got shot in Virginia the other day by a 6-year-old kid. What the fuck is going on in the world? But
Yeah.
are we not exposing kids to rock and roll, to things? I mean, I grew up on that. My first albums, my mom and dad gave me my first music. It was like Beatles, Rolling Stones, Beach Boys. That's what started me off. But those were all people that had something to say. If you take modern day Latin music, and you translate the lyrics, it's all about baby baby come here, shake your ass. And it's
Yeah.
it's not right. And I mean, fine, dance to whatever you want. It's fine. And if that's what you want to listen to, that's up to you. Everybody has their own choice, but give them a choice. You
Hmm.
know, what we've been taken out of the list. Rock and roll has been taken away from people. You
Hmm.
know, you I'm not saying force anything down anybody's throat, but give them a choice.
I know guys in pretty famous bands, and when they're not on tour, they're just working normal jobs, because you're making your money from touring now. You're not making your money from album sales or stuff like that. So these guys, I'm not going to mention them, but they're in a pretty big band. They'll go out maybe 6 or 8 week tour of America, go back home, back to work. Then they'll come out to Europe, maybe do the same 4, 5, 6 weeks, back to work again,
Yeah, but it used
and
to be like
back
we did,
to and cover bands and stuff like that on the side that they can do and make some money.
yeah, but it used to be like we do an 8-week tour, and even if you weren't a huge band, like uh, when you come back home, you start work on your next album. You were a professional musician. That's the problem is, as soon as everybody can pick up one of these and make a movie and call themselves a director or a
Yeah,
producer
yeah,
or a cameraman or an actor or a musician, or, uh, I studied for years to become what I am, and I
yeah.
consider myself an artist, and I'm still learning. If you start taking away the professional side of things. Like Spain is very interesting that way, because when we had the civil war here, a lot of the artistic side of society backed up the republic and not the fascist government. So years later, being an artist in Spain has always been seen as you're a lefty, you're red, and therefore, sometimes lazy or against the system, and it's absurd, but that's what they paint us as, and it's going to get to a point where, I might say to someone, if my kid ever said, Dad, I want to be an influencer, I'd be like, you're not going to be an influencer. That's not a job. Mind you, today it is. And if someone says, I want to be an actor, they'll say, well, that's not a job. You're going to have to do something on the side. Acting is a very serious job. It's a very difficult job. And, actors nowadays, this is what I was talking about at the beginning of the interview. You get picked because, he's the character. It's him. He's perfect for the role. Put him in something else after that. And he won't know how to do it, because that is not an actor. It's someone acting very naturally in front of the camera. It's no, just respect the profession, respect the cameraman, respect the makeup artist, respect the set designers, respect the photography people, respect the actors. Just respect that this is a profession. And I mean this, like, everybody who's involved in this profession, from producers to networks to casting directors to everybody, just, take care of our profession. Don't, because making little choices like that is going to end up eating it up and destroying it. And we're going to have to start rebuilding again.
I thoroughly enjoyed our chat today. I think it wasn't like your normal interview where I'd be like, well, what's your favorite scene in this thing, or what's this, what's that? And I don't deal in facts and figures at all, man.
You can ask that if you want, but I've answered those questions so many times now that anybody know that they can probably look for it on another interview.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially if we're going to be talking about music, that's going to bring something completely different out of me. And I'd rather have that kind of interview on a platform like yours, because I think it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, well, look, I think we'll have to maybe catch up again in the future, maybe when you've got something going on, and we'll just have another conversation. But like, I know you said you're not big into the social media thing, but if people do want to follow you on social media, where's the best place to get you? I'll put the links underneath this video as well.
Yeah. Usually I'm active on, out of anything, just Instagram, because I have to have one according to my agents. Yeah, so that's William Miller Actor on Instagram. And I usually reply to anybody who writes to me, because I have the time. Some people are like, no, I get so many DMs. Not true. So I'm, if when I have time, I answer. And if it takes me very long, it's either because you've been rude and said horrible, or because I haven't been active lately.
Yeah. William, look, absolute pleasure today, man, and I wish you the best of luck and everything. Hope to catch up again with you soon.
Thank you, Maurice, and dude, it's been a pleasure, really.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Okay. Good luck to you.
Cheers, man.